Awesome.
All right, I'll get started here. So this presentation is basically about a couple meta-analyses looking at storage and nutrition content of produce. So think fruits and vegetables. Nuts aren't included in this. It's like zucchini, like oranges, stuff like that. It was two parts. The second part was really not having a lot of good conclusions. Like I'll mention them, but I didn't specifically put them in this presentation. So let's get started. So obviously we all know what fruits and vegetables are. They're really healthy. They're valuable to integrate into our diets. They have vitamins, minerals, nutrients that are considered fairly important to us. And each fruit usually has some sort of thing that could be beneficial. There's been studies on something like pumpkin, which has compounds to actually improve muscle recovery. Ginger has similar compounds that do the same thing. So really, produce is really important to us and has many benefits, except one of its main problems is that it has a limited shelf life, and it also has an optimal period for both flavor and nutrient value. So here's kind of the dilemma. So it's fresh fruit versus frozen fruit versus canned fruit or vegetables. And I think a lot of people tend to go for fresh, tend to go for frozen. There are a few use cases for canned, but I'd say for our generation, canned food isn't really something that we are rapidly eating. Maybe it's like a pumpkin pie filling that's canned, or like cherries that are canned, not things that we actually mean to eat for a healthy cause. But I wanted to kind of go over these and maybe change some misconceptions that could be around these. So fresh produce is really the least processed. It kind of encounters the least handling, and its handling is basically dealt with in frozen and canned. So frozen produce, if you didn't know this, is actually just blanched. So it's boiled very quickly in water, and this inactivates its enzymes. It also keeps it looking nice, but it can lead to the loss of water-soluble vitamins. I'll explain what those are, the most relevant ones later on. And canned products are also heated in water, but they're often heated for a long time, which can degrade heat-sensitive nutrients, as well as kind of leach out those water-soluble vitamins. One good thing about canning, though, is that it's not exposed to oxygen, and oxidative loss or degradation of nutrients is then prevented. So think about what canning does. Canning essentially stores food for a very, very long time. While fresh can spoil and frozen is kind of a bit of a medium, and I'll explain why later. Okay, so let's start with something everybody knows, everybody likes. Everybody likes vitamin C. We all know its benefits. It has, benefit in a lot of things in cells. It's very water soluble. It's heat sensitive. And one of the sad things about it, even though it's so potent as something beneficial to you, it begins degrading immediately after harvest. And so something like green peas will lose over 50% of its vitamin C content within 24 to 48 hours. So, that's probably like, if it's being transported from the US, 24 to 48 hours, by the time it's at your store, it's already elapsed some of that time, and some of its vitamins have already decreased. And cooking, let's say you cook these peas later, it's actually going to further reduce these because they are heat sensitive. So I've just shown kind of what I looked through on these. I didn't do this for all of them. I just gave you the conclusions, but I thought we'd go through these tables to kind of show you the loss from storage and, the processes themselves. So if we look here at table 3, this is comparing the initial effect of having a fresh fruit versus canned. So you can see that canned causes a considerable upfront loss, which is right here, a considerable upfront loss of nutrients, which might make you think that immediately it is a not viable form. It's like eating just kind of mushy, kind of sweet stuff. But in reality, this is just an upfront cost. And one thing people don't really recognize is that the fruit that they're measuring here is like fresh picked, right? Like it's not the stuff that you see at your store. So that just keep that in mind. But yes, canning will lead to an upfront loss of vitamin C. And you'll see even below it here, even freezing and blanching will have an upfront loss. And once again, it's because vitamin C is very water soluble. It's heat sensitive. And these processes do take time. So you end up with actually, it's degrading as it's waiting, right? But an interesting thing is, how about the loss of ascorbic acid or vitamin C in fresh fruit? And you can see here that for something like broccoli, it loses a significant amount within 7 days. And let's see here. So at room temp, which some of these stuff are stored at your supermarket, they lose considerable amounts of vitamin C. So think of your spinach. So if your spinach has been at your supermarket for 7 days, its vitamin C content has gone down by 75%, which is something to keep in mind, right? If you buy things and then you even store them at home, their nutritional value is decreasing by the day. And this isn't to tell you that the second you buy fruit or vegetables that you need to immediately eat them. It's just something to be aware of. So if you plan to keep your fruit around, or you don't mind frozen fruit, you can see that frozen fruit being stored actually retains vitamin C. And so it's one of those things where you have to pick what works best for you. Are you going to eat it soon? The cost effectiveness, what are you getting? And if nutrition is something you really value and you want to actually have the nutrient values that you think you're getting from the fruit you're buying, knowing these things should be important to you so that you are as healthy as possible. And so this last one here compares the fresh, frozen, and canned in cooked and uncooked formats. And you can see that, like I said, without storage, almost always fresh fruit is the best. Not storing the food at all, just eating it is going to have the most nutrients. But as that time elapses, it becomes a balance between an upfront cost versus the time of which you're going to eat the fruit after harvesting. So what does that mean for vitamin C? If I confused you with that huge explanation, is that fresh fruit is the best as long as you don't have prolonged storage or transportation. And the reality with being in Canada and having long winters is that fruit is often imported from far, far away. It takes a while to get here, and the nutrients degrade during that time. And so another option is frozen fruit, which essentially starts off with less initial degradation than canning. But the thing with frozen fruit is that it's still able to chemically oxidize and react in ways that reduce the nutrients over time. It's just significantly slower than fresh fruit. And in supermarkets, canned and frozen fruit can have much more vitamin C than fresh fruit. And this translates to other vitamins and other nutrients, but it's just kind of the first example I'm using. And one other thing you want to keep in mind is that cooking vegetables reduces vitamin C further. So, a fresh salad is probably a good idea. Try not to overcook your fruits. Some people already know this, but it's surprising how little you can heat fruit and vegetables before they start losing their nutritional content. So next thing I want to go talk about is B vitamins. They're a very large group of vitamins. They're also water soluble. They're heat sensitive. But interestingly, riboflavin, which is one of the compounds, is light sensitive, and thiamine is really unstable, similar to vitamin C. However, you can see that there's this whole chart here that shows a bunch of these. I would say that there isn't enough research to really say, but generally speaking, it's the same rules for vitamin C. Frozen tends to retain more nutrients than canned, but really concrete conclusions aren't possible because there aren't really enough studies. It's just something to keep in mind. The next thing I'm going to talk about is phenolic compounds. And these ones are the ones that are talked about in superfoods and being extremely valuable. So they're really antioxidants, and they're vital in defense responses, anti-aging, anti-inflammatory. There's studies that seem to link them. I wouldn't say there's anything concrete, and they're not actually considered nutrients. They're a huge group of compounds, but they really work well in releasing oxidative stress in cells, is what seems to be the thought process behind their importance. And in food, it's measured using the total of phenolic compounds, because measuring one is just not possible. They're water soluble, which is something you should be aware of. If you're buying, let's say, blackberries, blueberries, getting them canned versus getting them frozen, this will affect their total phenolic compounds. So if you really like blueberries and you're like, wow, they're a superfood, or you buy something from far away that comes frozen that you consider a superfood, maybe like kiwi, which is really, really healthy and arguably maybe not the best tasting fruit, but one of the most nutritionally dense for a lot of people, and is really important for that. You might not be getting the nutrients that you expect. So, if you're getting canned products that are supposed to have phenolic compounds, canned products are usually stored in water. And so what you'll get is a leaching out of these phenolic compounds. This isn't a bad thing if you're actually going to keep and use the water content in the can for whatever you're doing. But if you're draining it and then having it, you're probably decreasing the amount of nutrients quite significantly. Anyway, thanks, Aiden. And then for phenolic compounds, typically the highest concentration is in the peel of the produce. So this doesn't mean that most of it is in the peel. It just means that it's just the most concentrated there. So if you're taking a cucumber, most of the phenolic compounds are going to be in the peel. And a lot of people tend to take away the peel of, things like that. If you want the phenolic compounds, they're in the peel. So that's just something to know. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the second half of this paper that talks about vitamin E, which they didn't have any concrete conclusions. Vitamin A and carotenoids also didn't have any concrete conclusions. Fiber, if you would have already guessed, doesn't really change much. It's fairly stable. You get your fiber from canned, fresh, frozen, as you would normally. One interesting thing, though, is if you're mineral deficient, turns out canned foods can actually have higher mineral content than fresh or frozen vegetables. And even though that some of those minerals can be not really stable, the water that they use can actually push in minerals into the fruit or vegetable, and that can end up actually adding to the nutritional content of the food, which is kind of weird, but cool. So I'm just going to get into my final thoughts. Canned fruits and vegetables aren't as nutrient deficient as people probably think. And, they can be really cost effective. And there's kind of a stigma around getting it. Everybody wants to get fresh fruit. There's this perception that the fresh fruit that you get at a supermarket is going to be really, really healthy compared to frozen or canned. But in reality, the distance and the storage of that fruit can result in it being more nutritionally deficient. And you might be better off, maybe even money-wise and health-wise, to just get the canned and the frozen. That doesn't mean that canned and frozen taste as good. Sometimes it isn't, but I would say with modern freezing technology, it's pretty close. And it's something that if you haven't thought about, you should really think about integrating in some way for some things. One thing that's really common is people use canned tomatoes, and canned tomatoes are actually more healthy, nutritionally speaking, than fresh tomatoes that you find at a superstore, and it's actually a substantial difference. I didn't show that figure in this presentation, but I'm just kind of adding it on. Fresh fruit, I already said that. Okay, and then the last thing I want to say is that really being independent with your food production can actually be really beneficial. So we can talk about farmers markets. Anywhere where you can get fresh produce or pick it yourself is going to have the ideal, optimal nutrient content. So, it could cost a bit more, but the quality you're getting is really a lot higher. And another option is home gardens. I didn't realize this, and I really like gardening, and we have a little bit of a garden here at home. And I didn't realize how much of a difference it makes nutrition-wise. But even growing something like your own peas or mint or basil can, harbor a lot of nutrients that would be lost if you just bought them from the superstore. So make use of these opportunities, and it'll give you the best product nutritionally. And sometimes it's even better than the store. So think tomatoes. Tomatoes at the store really taste like water to me. They don't really have much tomato flavor. You think of strawberries, which are just kind of water, because they've altered the cultivars that they want to use so much to be really big that they forgot about the most important thing, which is really the flavor and the nutrient content. So sometimes at the store you're getting something that's really not that nutritionally dense, and even if it was, it's lost a lot of it, and it doesn't even taste that good. So there are some other options there, and yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to say. I think that you go into a supermarket and you look at all this amazing fruit and you really feel like you're being healthy, and you are. It's not like eating fresh fruit is bad or eating canned fruit is bad or anything like that. And probably most of us don't get enough fruits and vegetables, but it's important to kind of keep in mind, if you've seen something at the store for a long time, it's probably not as nutritionally dense as it was, and you might not be getting the benefits that you think you're getting. So that kind of concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
That was really good, Ahmed.
Thank you for that, Ahmed.
Yeah, it was an important.
Very well done.
An important presentation.
I had a couple questions, but you did answer one of them in the presentation. So I wrote down, how does the rate of degradation change over time? I'm assuming there's minimal nutrient loss after the initial wave of nutrient loss.
Yeah, as compared to fresh fruit. So fresh fruit degrades much faster.
Yeah.
Because it's exposed to both heat, it's exposed to oxygen, whereas that is kind of limited for canned and frozen.
It's so sad to me because it makes me think like it's like, everyone's tempted to buy the fruit on sale, which is near expiry, but it's like, I don't know, it's like you want to be the one who doesn't do that to get more nutrients, but then at the same time, it's like, then you're just letting a bunch of food go to waste. Like it's a real conundrum, I guess, but maybe we should start encouraging people to buy fresh fruit and be more efficient with fruit distribution or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I was thinking, while you were finishing up here and you're talking about how good it is, farmers markets and very fresh fruit and whatever, I was thinking about the conversation we had about, for example, in Egypt and certain countries, people may, they want these superstores, which are air conditioned and flying in all these products from afar. But it's like, well, maybe, the farmer's market is optimal, just having locally grown things as your primary food source. Because it makes me think, buying exotic produce sounds like not only a big waste of money just because of transport, but like further waste of money because you're going to get more degradation with transport.
Yeah, it's interesting because like they do have open markets in Egypt. Like you can go get fruit that's pretty fresh. The problem with it is that it goes bad because it's so warm that there's obviously pests and stuff that really want to get at it. But yeah, people tend to really like, especially university students over there, they tend to kind of be like, oh no, I don't want to go to the market. I want to go to the superstore. I want to get stuff in an air conditioned environment. And maybe they're actually kind of they're playing themselves a little bit because they're getting a subpar product possibly.
I would imagine though, like the air conditioning, like would obviously help preserve it, keep it away from pests and whatever.
Yeah.
But okay, so I noticed some of your citations were really old. Like there were some from like 1959, 1970s, whatever. Right? So we're talking about something which is 70, 50 years old, right? There were newer ones, 1990s, I believe even 2000s, whatever.
Yeah.
But we could presume there's going to be a lot of changes in how are these foods genetically modified, maybe chemicals added to the foods, and how exactly are they processed. So my question for you is, how would some of the results, do you think, and for example, talking about ascorbic acid degradation, like how well do you think some of these results would generalize to, concurrently to today?
Yeah, so the problem with this field is it's not something that's studied very heavily, which is why the authors of the meta-analyses and even the papers that I've looked to kind of try to kind of confirm some of these results myself, is that, there's not much research. But if I was to make a prediction, I would say generally, large scale producers of produce aren't necessarily worried about the nutritional content. They care about the speed at which the fruit is growing, how it looks. Does it look nice? Are people going to buy it? And then they're looking at how well it sells, right? So it's flavor. Nutrients might not be the focus. So that could be an effect there. I would say for freezing, there has been considerable advancement. So canning is something that's quite common. I wouldn't say there has been any sufficient miracles in how that's done. It's pretty similarly done all the way through. But for fruits, freezing technology has gotten really, really good. and it's really, really fast, which means that it preserves the quality of the fruit, you know, at a higher quality. So I would say the results of frozen fruit are probably higher and cause less degradation than what we're seeing, because likely that frozen fruit is being picked fresh rather than sometimes, you know, fruit that's brought to the supermarket is actually picked before it's even ripe. So it's green, and as it's transporting, they could, you know, ripen it using chemicals, you know, like any chemicals. I think like bananas transmit a chemical that ripens fruit, and they could be using chemicals that do the same thing to ripen fruit once it's there. But realistically, it hasn't had the same amount of time to even get those nutrients. So as we go to have these fruits delivered from further and further away, what we could be doing is giving the plant less time to even get those nutrients in the plant, and then we're transporting it where it's degrading, and then we ripen it to just sell it. And so I would say probably fresh fruit right now has less nutrients than what was seen previously, and frozen fruit, which is picked ripe, probably has more nutrients than what was seen previously.
That's really interesting because I'm like, you know, like it makes sense, the idea, pick it, you know, just like a greenish banana, you know, then it's yellow by the time it reaches store. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. I guess I had a question with that, but I can't. Can you go back to the to that actual slide with all those results, and as well as the vitamin B slide? Just because I was too busy writing some questions, and I was also here, I'm gonna take a picture of that.
Sure. I mean, the thing with the B vitamins is that there really wasn't a ton of papers. Like it was like it's hard to really come to a conclusion with them because there's so many of them, and it's not something that's looked into. Like even the USDA has incorrect values for what it thinks. You know, for spinach, they think that fresh is actually better than the frozen spinach, not frozen chopped, just frozen spinach, and that's actually not the case. Like frozen spinach tends to have higher vitamin C content than fresh spinach because fresh spinach loses its vitamin C content so quickly. But there's just not enough research. So
I imagine this stuff would vary wildly, right? Like you want to talk about, you're trying to understand some concept, you know, methodically, right? And then it's like, well, where did you get your vegetables from, right? Like what was the soil content like, right? Like, right? And so then you're like, I don't know, this is obviously like, it's not intuitive to say that this is a very hard problem to solve, right? And now I remember my question about last time. It's like, okay, you pick the fruit before it's ripe, and then you know you eat it yellow, whatever, and maybe it hasn't absorbed its nutrients fully. But what I find interesting is it's like sometimes you're craving a different kind of banana. You know what I mean? Like, like for example, like I kind of like sometimes my fruit to be a little sour, sometimes to be a little bit more sweet, and I wonder like, what is my body doing? Is my body doing an exchange between, like it's demanding certain nutrients over others? Is it demanding sugar sweetness? Like, you know, I wonder, you know, is there an optimal kind of ripeness to eat the fruit, or is it just, you know, listen to your body?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe the body does have some, you know, thing where like something I prefer, like, you know, I really dislike bruised or dark bananas. I prefer them, you know, with just a little bit of green at the very tip, you know, a bit more sour. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know if I can answer that question, but I think it's really interesting that you noted the research side, because one of the things that's weird with the research is how do you do this research? So do you do it using the exact same cultivar of fruit or vegetable? So are you taking the exact same thing and then are you canning it? Because that's not necessarily real life. Sometimes they'll use different cultivars for fresh fruit versus frozen or canned because they exhibit better properties. So you actually will get a little bit of a deviation.
Can I pause you for a sec?
Oh yeah.
Maybe you're losing me in some farmer language. What is a cultivar?
It's like a species that's specific. So like it's like a specific crop.
Okay.
So like it's like one company's crop of, you know, peas.
So
but
yeah,
the other
so
company is like a little bit different.
Yeah, like so instead of looking at like, I don't know, maybe like multiple farms for, kiwis or whatever, you're looking
Yeah.
like, should you, obviously it's a bad idea to, if you want to find like a general answer, to just look at one kiwi farm. If you want to get a general concept, you'd look at a lot of farms and pursue a normal distribution.